Hello everyone, my name is London Cavaletto, and today I'm going to present to you my final project for the class where I conducted an analysis of cognitive decline in adults from 8 US states. To give you some background, the data I used for this project comes from the CDC's Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System that conducts an annual survey to collect information on respondents' health-related risk behaviors, chronic health conditions, healthcare access, and use of preventive health services. In addition to a standard questionnaire, states may also opt in to add on additional modules to their survey. And one of these being the cognitive decline module, which in 2018 was administered in addition to the standard survey, to respondents from Maine, Michigan, New York, New Jersey, Oregon, and Pennsylvania. The main objective of my project is to understand what factors are the most significant in cases of cognitive decline in the United States, specifically in adults. As mentioned earlier, my data comes from CDC's BRFSS from the 2018 survey. After pre-processing the data, I had left over 72,309 observations, and I chose 20 variables for my analysis, 6 of which are response variables and 14 are predictors. The response variables all come from the cognitive decline module, where the first question people are asked is whether or not they had experienced confusion or memory loss that has been happening more frequently or is getting worse. If respondents answer yes or they are not sure, then they are asked these 5 follow-up questions, where the questionnaire asks them if they had given up day-to-day chores, activities, or work and social activities due to confusion or memory loss. And in times where they are unable to conduct their day-to-day activities, if they had assistance. And whether or not they had discussed with a healthcare professional these issues. For my predictors, I was curious to see whether or not marital status, smoking, alcohol drinking or consumption, falling, health insurance, doctor's visits, mental health days, and poor physical health, exercise, sleep, and income influenced respondents who had experienced cognitive decline or who didn't experience cognitive decline. Another important thing to note here is that I changed the reported values from 2, 0, and 1 in the SMM-LOS data, where 1 being respondents who were administered the cognitive decline module. For my analysis, I used 3 different models, the first 2 being the multinomial logic model and the linear discriminant analysis model, where the formula for both of them is given below. In addition, additionally, I also used a hierarchical model because my data presents a hierarchical structure with the cognitive decline module where people either took it or didn't, and the people who did take it were asked additional questions. The difference between the top and bottom model is just a regressed variable, where in the bottom it's a matrix of 2 columns, where the first column is the SMM-LOS data, and the second column is just the sum of the other responses in the follow-up questions of the cognitive decline module. To illustrate a little bit better the data, here are some frequency plots for the SMM-LOS variable against the other predictors. As we can see here, the lines are relatively flat, and there isn't much variability. But when we proceed to the other variables, we see more fluctuations in the frequencies. But right here, we have the variables that relate to drinking, and we can see that for this, for frequency of days in the past 30 days that respondents reported drinking, as well as binge drinking, a number of days they had been binge drinking, influenced or increased the number of people who took the cognitive decline module, and that also sleep was a significant factor in increasing the number of people who also took the cognitive decline module. So for poor mental health, we can see that there's some more fluctuation as people reported experiencing more poor mental health days in the last 30 days. Somewhat similarly for poor health, where people self-reported experiencing poor health or mental health within the last 30 days. As people reported higher numbers, we also see larger variation and even some spikes right around here at 19 to 20. If people had reported falling with it, for people who reported falling within the last 12 months, we see that as the number increases, so does the number of people who ended up taking the cognitive decline module. In terms of healthcare access, people who had Medicare, Medicaid, had some other form of insurance, or didn't have insurance or refused to answer, or were not sure whether they had insurance. These people also took the cognitive decline module in higher numbers. Well, instead, people who reported going to the doctor more frequently, we see that as the number of visits increases, so does the number of people who took the cognitive decline module. Here are some box plots of the sum-MLOS over the CNS data against the other predictor variables. Due to an overwhelming number of zeros, most of the plots, except for this one right here, all the box plots are collapsed at the bottom, except for people who had fallen. Here we see that there's a much nicer box plot with the average around between 0.05 and 0.1 for about 29 times people had fallen. For the most part, though, we see this pattern where between 0 and 0.5, the data is clustered the most around here. And this trend continues into the other slides. After running the models in ARM, I got these results, where for the LDA I did not report a residual deviance or an AIC, but for the multinomial logit model and the hierarchical model, we see better results for both residual deviance and AIC. In terms of correct rate, the MLM and the hierarchical model are the same, with the LDA following shortly behind. In terms of sensitivity, the LDA performed the best, but in specificity, we see that the hierarchical model is 1 once, and the MLM is pretty close to 1. This is due to the fact that the hierarchical model classified all the observations as people who had not experienced cognitive decline. And in the MLM, on all but one of the observations of people who did not experience cognitive decline was misclassified. While instead for LDA, um, it follows behind the MLM by just a bit. I also ran some tests on the MLM and the hierarchical model where I used ANOVA to compute the p-value with a chi-square distribution. And when I tested the MLM and the hierarchical model against their relative min models, which was just the response variable against against 1, or regressed on 1, we rejected the null hypothesis. While instead, when testing the two models against their respective maximum model, which used all the predictors, we did not reject those models for the full model. So in conclusion, the LDA performed the best at classifying the response variables in MEMLOS in terms of sensitivity. The MLM performed the best in terms of AIC and residual deviance, and the MLM and hierarchical model were not rejected by the ANOVA test. Thank you very much. Have a great day.